let's get you some facts, figures, and some patterns as how this exercise went today. I'm being joined by the Executive Director of Yiaga Africa, Mr. Samson Itodo. Samson, how are you today?
Very well.
Welcome to the program.
Look very fresh. It looks like you didn't go out today. But
my looks and my state of mind are totally different.
Completely different.
Well, what a day.
What a day.
Would you say that everything went the way you thought or predicted as an organization?
I think to a large extent, everything went really well. And this is what elections should look like in some cases, because it was peaceful. Yeah, there were cases of violence, but I'll say to a large extent, it was in a very peaceful atmosphere. And I'm sure when we go into the data, we'll clearly see how today fared. But I'll say to a large extent, we have to commend the people of Ekiti for the way they conducted themselves in a very peaceful manner. But of course, when we look at other manifestation of voting behavior, I think there are concerns that we have to express as it relates to what were the incentives, for coming out to vote, and whether the choices that people made, it's not as a result of any influence by voter inducement or vote buying. But one thing that's quite rampant today was this vote buying, and that was really unfortunate, I must say. But to a large extent, I think if you want to look at this either from the aspect of logistics, we'll say yes, commendably, this process had gone really well. Before the elections at Yiaga Africa and our other partners, there were 3 tests that we're going to use to evaluate this entire process. The first one was a preparedness test. To what extent is INEC prepared, managing logistics, opening of polls? As you would see from the data, it speaks for itself that there was a marked improvement. So to a large extent, I think INEC passed that preparedness test. So far, so good. The collation processes are on, and which takes us to the next test, which is the transparency test, and how the results have been managed from the polling units to the ward, to the local government level. I'm sure in a short while we will see what's happening to the IREV, but we can't say that to a large extent there's some level of transparency. But we look forward to how this ends. And then also the conduct of security agencies in terms of their neutrality. So on the whole, we must commend all the stakeholders for how far they've conducted themselves.
I think it's a journey. It's not a destination. Absolutely. And whatever has happened today, we should be able to take some lessons, albeit hoping that everything is fair.
They're good, and there's somewhat negative lessons. For instance, when you look at the turnout, at this moment we're not in a position to make projections as to turnout, but I'll say based on observation, as we had predicted yesterday, when we thought that we were going to be shocked by the people of Ekiti having recorded 97.1% PVC collected. At the end of the day, the turnout does not match the numbers of PVCs collected, which raises a lot of questions and concerns.
About the reality of the collection of the permanent voters card.
That's right.
Because you want to ask yourself, what have they done with the PVCs they've collected?
Yeah, that is if the PVCs are actually in the hands
of the rightful
owners.
But let's look at some of the patterns. Of course, we'd like to let our viewers know that China Television and Yiaga Africa are partnering on what we call the ERA 2.0, the process of exposing and monitoring the result as it comes into the IREV by INEC. Well, first and foremost, let's look at some of the patterns and some of what you need to know as far as this election is concerned. We told you about the ERAD, which relies on INEC's IREV, and we already know just how many results have gone into the IREV and how much of that we are able to crunch and process and verify for the ERAD so that it can make sense in patterns, in graphs, in maps, all of the results that have come in so far. So Samson, yes, we said yesterday what ERAD stands for, what it will do for you, not only now in Osun, in 2027 election, And those who were asking what exactly is the surprise, they wanted to provoke me to say it. They went after me on social media to want me to say what exactly we have in 2027. We've got it on lockdown. 2027, I bet you any politician who wants to rig the election should think twice.
I'm glad that you're not letting the cat out of the bag.
I'm not going to let it. All right. So we said it.
Yeah, I think
what it's not what it is.
Reiterate that the election results analysis dashboard, it's not INEC and it does not declare results. As we will see in a short while, that the results are based on results that are already in the public space. Results that INEC has published via the INEC election results viewing portal, which is what we have taken, and we're bringing it right to the homes of Nigerians and those who are out across the world. So it does not declare results. INEC is the responsible institution that declares results. So what we are simply doing
by law,
we bring basically,
as far as Nigeria is concerned,
what
happens in Kenya, in South Africa, in Ghana, and in the US and in the UK are totally different legal frameworks, different from Nigeria.
Absolutely.
But in Nigeria, as far as the constitution, which empowers INEC to conduct and declare winner in an election, and the electoral law, which says they are the only authority that will declare the result and a winner in an election. But what we are doing is whatever that is made available in the public as far as the announcement of the result at the polling unit is concerned, documented in the IREF, is what we are crunching, and we are bringing the technology to bear to expose the result and put it in a manner in which you will understand and enjoy. That's what we're doing for you. So Yiaga Africa, of course, sent out several observers for this election. That's what we call the PVT, monitoring how early the compliance to the process and all of that. And there's a lot that we can make sense of. But in terms of how early INEC officials called at the polling unit, this is what we know, right?
For this is the observers, right? So on the PVT, by 8:30 or 8:30 a.m. today, 96% of observers were already on the field. What that tells you,
8:30 a.m., which is the kickoff time.
That's the kickoff time. And so when we flip, you will see this is how it fared across Ekiti today. When you look at, when accreditation and voting commenced by 8:30 a.m., that's in Ekiti Central. Ekiti Central. That by
73% of the
73% of polling stations or polling units, accreditation and voting already commenced. When you go to Ekiti North, in 65%, in Ekiti South, you have 64%. What it tells you is that there was early commencement of accreditation and voting. And as you would see subsequently, when we compared the data between 2022 and 2026, it is obvious that there was a marked improvement in the way INEC managed logistics in this election compared to 2022.
So give it to INEC. Where you get it right, we'll give you a pass mark. And on this one, give INEC a pass mark. They did better than 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
If they did worse than 4 years ago, it's like a student who never learned anything. But they did better this time around.
On arrival,
we will get to where they did wrong. But on this one, INEC did well because they were able to surmount their logistical problems.
Absolutely.
And they brought it to bear. Early arrival compared to last year, over 90% overall in those who called in, officials who got to the polling unit at 8:30 a.m.
It's quite impressive that at this election we're talking about logistical challenges. And so I think this should be a template that INEC will adopt moving forward. As you can see, by 8:30 a.m. in 68% of polling units, the officials had arrived, and by 10:30, virtually across the entire state, you had accreditation and voting in the state. So this is accreditation and voting. Now, when you look at 2022, this is what data tells us, like I mentioned. Compared to 2022, in 2022, from the sampled polling units that Yiaga Africa covered, INEC officials or accreditation and voting had commenced only 24% of polling. So when you check, compare 2022 and 2026, this is what you call an astronomic.
Give it to INEC.
So
Good one.
To INEC.
Logistics used to be INEC's problem.
Yeah.
The Achilles heel of INEC.
At least in this election.
Yes, in this election, they've got, and if they can keep up the pace.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe Professor Joash Amubiton learned logistics and management with law, but then it's coming to bear. Whatever that they've done, whatever lessons they've learned, it has worked. I don't want to care how they did it, but what they've done is what we need to applaud. On this one, massive improvement from 24% 4 years ago to 68%.
And by 1 hour later,
99%, virtually all the polling units.
Virtually all the polling units.
Yeah.
Well, of course, this has to do with materials, election materials. There can be no election without materials. So when you look at the deployment, you see where, with the ballots, papers, but what we try to focus on issues around disability. And you can see that election materials clearly shows that the Form EC40H, which is used for tracking the data for persons living with disability in this election, was observed and seen in 78% of polling units that we covered. And then for the PWD poster, which is the poster for persons living with disability. What this also says is that to a large extent, that INEC did fulfill its commitment to advance the inclusion of persons living with disability. And I think that it's actually kudos to them. However, there were cases where there were shortages of ballot papers. In one of the polling units, when you look at the ballot papers, ideally they have 100 ballot papers. Some of them were short either by 10 or by 4. Unfortunately, the presiding officers didn't count the ballot papers at commencement, which is what they should have done. And that created a lot of computational issues in that particular polling unit. I think that's something that INEC needs to take when it trains its officials, but also confirm your sensitive materials to be sure that in each bundle you have 100 ballot papers.
And let everyone know that indeed out of 250 polling units, only two did not open by or report at 12 noon.
And that's to mention, this is a representative sample, because what Yiaga Africa does with the PRVT is we deploy to a representative sample of polling units. And that particular methodology and that deployment is representative. And so whatever data that Yiaga Africa releases from the PRVT, it's a true representation of what could have transpired statewide.
In the larger context. So deployment of BVAS. Of the 2% of the polling units had 2 or more BVAS devices deployed. That means they were ready for any eventuality. 4% of BVAS accreditation count was not shown to voters to confirm it was set to 0 before the start of accreditation.
Now, this is a violation of INEC's regulations and guidelines, because what the presiding officers should do upon opening of a polling unit, they need to show the public and those at the voting at the polling unit that there was 0 record on the BVAS. It is transparency. It deepens the credibility of the process. But in 4% of polling units, we discovered that the presiding officers didn't display the BVAS for the public and the voters to view and
the idea is that so that it is not preloaded.
Preloaded, yes.
And the result or whatever is not predetermined.
Yes,
and that's
this. Even though it's 4%, it might not be statistically significant, but it hits
a breach. Is a breach.
Not just the guidelines, but it could cast doubt on the credibility of the process.
All right. Also, we're talking about the performance of the BVAS. 96%.
This is remarkable. This is remarkable.
So if this is what the PVT is telling us, that means that there is a huge improvement. Although we caught on camera in one of the polling units that we covered here on Channels Television, where we saw live that as of 8:30 a.m., the error code reads on the BVAS saying you cannot enter into the BVAS or get information or get the process started because it's not yet time, and it started at 8:30 a.m. and closed at 10 p.m. And of course, he didn't allow them, and he was telling them, he alerted them to call on a technician to help fix it. But I mean, a few people also made that complaint. But what I saw enormously in half of the time that they accredited people was that once they tried to take a biometric, the picture of an elderly the biometric the facial recognition feature in the beavers, it was failing. So they resorted into manual process, sending them back to the official who had the manual register. I saw this a lot of the time. They try, because you have to have your thumbprint, then your card is about 3 layers of verification. Your card, your PVC, your thumb, which is the biometric feature, then the facial recognition feature. That had a lot of problem, and a lot of older people were complaining that they were not being recognized. In fact, there was a lady we caught on camera who was asked to go and wash her face because maybe she had makeup, because it wouldn't recognize her. And a lot of aged and elderly people were not recognized. That was a major problem that I personally saw.
I think it's a fundamental problem. The truth is, when you look at our entire voter data management system, there are impurities that need to be fixed. For instance, you talked about facial recognition, you talk about fingerprints. These are fundamental issues with our voters register. Even if the beavers performed in 96%, the fact that you've got 4% where you recorded these challenges, I think it's a problem. And the reason why it's a problem is, in an election, no voter should be disenfranchised or not allowed to vote by virtue of a logistical challenge that they didn't contribute to. We must uphold the right, to vote. So these issues are issues INEC really needs to address about the configuration of the beavers machines, even though the guidelines provide that when a beavers fails, you ought to replace the beavers, with that beavers that malfunctions. Because technology has its own vulnerability. Sometimes it can fail. But the challenge and the problem is when there's intentional manipulation of the technology to undermine the participation of voters. That is where you have a fundamental problem. But whether it's 4 or 2 or 3%, I think that INEC needs to really fix these issues about beavers verification.
It has to be fixed. So what I've seen, and anybody can verify this with any of the gadgets you own. A lot of the gadgets, based on how they were made, could be very sensitive to touch, to light. So sometimes if you have a digital door in your house, and sometimes it refuses your fingerprint, and you will have to use other means. And sometimes even your phone, you have to remove your glasses, clean your face. Sometimes if the sensitivity level of such a gadget is high. So a lot of the times, maybe the maker, and a lot of lessons INEC need to also learn that the sensitivity, don't let us deceive ourselves. Something. The cameras that we're using right now are originally made for white people. And a lot of the sensitivity of this lens, the understanding in the head of the technology is that it's going to see a white person. So you have to adjust the lens to see the black man. So a lot of this technology needs to adjust to our temperature, because you remember what happened to the Z-Pad. They were getting hot and it shut down at the time. So these technologies need to be worked upon so that it adjusts to our nature, our environment, the texture and the complexion of the Nigerian people. So that in 2027, all of this sensitivity, just imagine some of these complaints are widespread. It could cause a major crisis.
I pray it's not widespread in subsequent elections. But yes, I agree.
But the PDP candidate complained. He literally got upset. Right? And he was he saw that he was leaving. He was walking off and saying, this is rubbish and nonsense. And he walked off to say, these things were rejecting people's recognition, and he was not able to verify people.
This is why there's a great need. We've always called for an audit of the beavers. And an audit, a public audit, would really inspire trust and confidence on the voters. I agree we need to decolonize these technological tools. But one critical point is what happens when it fails. If there's recourse to manual accreditation, then that is against the rule and the guidelines and our laws, because it is very clear that for you to vote, you must be accredited using the BVAS. That's what Section 47 of the Act clearly provides. So if any presiding officer or any election official accredited voters or bypass the BVAS, I think that calls for very strong, sanctions, and it, to a large extent, will undermine the credibility of the election from that particular polling unit. And if it's not widespread, we cannot say it substantially impacts on the overall outcome.
96% of performance beavers recorded by the PVT. Deployment of polling officials, how good did INEC perform?
Well, I think they performed very well. But one thing that we also found, if you check, that we actually noted that generally there were 3 officials in the polling unit. But INEC guidelines says 4 officials. So what happened to the 4th official? Could it be that there were issues around recruiting manpower, for this particular election? Because listen,
or budgetary
don't
issues.
Try this in the 2027 election.
I'm saying maybe it's budgetary issue. You may not say.
Because INEC also had budget issues prior to.
So because there are complaints about the release of funds. Yes, INEC is on the first line charge in terms of budgetary allocation. But the fact remains that if there are 4 people, meaning that there will be 4 people to be paid to do the job. So if there are 3 people instead of 4 people, it might also be financial or economic issues that may have affected it. INEC need to explain that.
But what also happened was that in most polling units, there wasn't order and there wasn't crowd management, because the officials were actually small in number. Because ideally, you have a queue controller. You can't do this in a presidential election where you have majority of voters actually showing up. You definitely record more turnout compared to governorship or off-cycle elections based on the electoral trends. So having 3 presiding officers first is against 4.
And there is a sense behind designing 4 people to man a polling unit.
So INEC also needs to explain what
a lot of explanation.
And I'm sure that perhaps there might be some administrative reasons behind this, but it also created some confusion in some of the polling units because crowd control wasn't
in some of the polling units. 16% of them are 2 officials.
2 officials. So I think something is actually wrong somewhere. Yes.
So deployment of party. This is where I've got a grouse with political parties who, at the end of the day, they complain a lot, but they have little or no power in themselves to be able to monitor out the process, because the agents are the eyes of the political parties on the ground.
That's right. Well,
so this is what we discovered.
I think the 2 major parties did actually 3 now did deploy to a great number of polling units. You can see the APC had in 99%, the PDP 95%, ADC somewhere at 69%, and then 14% of polling units you had Accord party. This is based on the PVT sample, and that is a random sample of 250 polling units. So you can clearly see the presence of party agents. You know what, Sean? One of the things that I think we should look at when you think about security personnel. Yes, in 98% of polling units, there was presence of security personnel. So they were quite deployed across perhaps
they had every. When I was speaking with the CP in charge of the election yesterday, he wouldn't tell me how many police officers were deployed, but he said they covered all grounds. So I see if 98% of all police. So what happened to the 2%? What does that mean?
Well, as you can see, this was at 12 noon. This afternoon. But again, this is the outlook. There was presence of security officials, and to be honest, in some of the polling units.
But jokingly, anyways, something our police officers are not this kitted.
No.
They are not as well kitted as this. But this guy here has got a gun around and got a comms. Our
but
dream
there are some
police.
police officers that you see them well kitted. I think
there's a few of them. Some of them also are
the well-fed.
You see the welfare one. Like you see in charge of the election. He's one of the welfare. You see him well kitted, and he's got his clique of his unit. They always come well kitted. Well, I mean, at the joking level, but the president needs to know, and the police IG is that these guys need to be kitted. They need to have cameras, body cameras. They need to have all of these gadgets that allows communication to be easier.
Absolutely, we do need to fund the police.
So you went to bring American police here?
This cannot be American.
It looks like American police.
No, not at all.
But anyways, the inconsistencies in the ballot and result sheets.
Yeah, I think this was one of the observations that we made this morning. When we went to the polling units, when you check the ballot papers, there were 19 parties. You check the result sheets, there were 15. And if you go to INEC's website, this one as of today, the final list had 14 candidates. Yeah. Now, the issue here is when you have these inconsistencies, they can create confusion. We understand the rationale behind this because of court-ordered court-ordered inclusion of party candidates on the ballot, but this needs to stop. And I think it goes beyond INEC. It's about the courts. It's about our political parties, how they manage this process. And yes, maybe INEC was trying, to save the day so it doesn't have to print ballot papers last minute or issues around logistics. But this does not look.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
I know you're trying to make sense of what really happened. So let's assume that there's a court, whatever, and I could have updated their list. That is easily in their powers to do.
Absolutely.
So you have 14 on the INEC list. The result sheet says there are 15 political parties on the ballot papers, and imagine that these two guys are being printed almost around the same time. So you printed a ballot paper that reads 19 political parties, except INEC has printed this 2 months ago or 3 months ago or whatever. Where do you record the result for the 4 other political parties? I can go to court and challenge it because I participated. I'm not listed on the ballot. I'm listed on the ballot paper, but there's no way to put my result.
But to even make it worse, if you've got 14 candidates, what if as a voter you vote for one of the parties, and at the end of the day, like you mentioned, the votes are not recorded? This is why these kinds of inconsistencies need to be addressed. And I say that it's about the courts, it's about politicians, it's also about INEC. Because if, for instance, and we've seen this actually happen, that on the eve of elections, you get a court order that says put this party on the ballot. What are you going to do? Are you going to print those ballot papers, for instance, in a governorship election overnight? Or you have to suspend the elections and then postpone it? And I think that where INEC got it wrong here was that it didn't communicate effectively to the public that these were, the issues for the public to understand. But I think that this is lessons learned, and for subsequent elections, we need to ensure that this
is an unacceptable error from INEC. The confusion is too much. You have 3 different figures as to the political party participation, and you got everybody confused. I'm hoping that this will not degenerate further. So
I think these were just images. You can see the ballot paper that was used today.
And this is the list as
published by INEC, and then these are the results sheets that were used. So all these 3.
I'm imagining which of the political parties that are missing from this. I probably will study this later to find out which of the political parties.
Because you had SDP, there's AA. I think they're quite PR.
There's ZLP actually.
There's ZLP is there. YPP is there. SDP, PRP.
So I'm wondering which of the political parties.
They're quite. They're quite on APGA.
Maybe it's APC.
So there's APGA on the ballot.
Or APGA.
There's APGA on the ballot.
Oh, the APGA is not here.
APGA
is missing here. Is APGA here? APGA is not here too.
There's this interesting logo here, but I don't know which party.
The crab? The one with the mosquito or something?
No, I think the one that with the key or something. I don't know what party is this.
Looks like no.
This is Youth Party.
Youth Party.
I think there's Youth Party.
And they were the ones who went to court.
Yes, and then
they're not listed here. No, so
yeah, these are things that shouldn't repeat. Now,
violence.
We've
got a lot of questions to ask.
We've got
so there are 24 of them.
Yeah, there were 24 reported incidents
in 10 local government
areas. This came from the Election Observation Hub that comprised the Kuka Center, the International Press Center, Nigerian Women Trust Fund, Yiaga Africa. You have the Center for Media and Society, CIMESO, and then TAF Africa.
Yeah.
Based on the collective reports, there were about 24 reported incidents, and this is where the action took place. You know what is surprising is that
Moba.
I was going to
Moba was predicted to be a hotspot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there
he didn't disappoint.
No.
It came true to his
it came true
to the prophecy. So I'm surprised that Emure was going Emure. They were not included in the hotspotting, but they really spotting hot there. Ijeru also was not there. But they were predicted too hard to be hotspot. But then, so this is what we have. We're hoping to get explanation, because there are also report late night yesterday. I was out trying to get the police to react to it. The report of arson and some incidents around in some part of the state, but we'll find out from the police.
No, I think that's all, except you want to now go to the ERAD.
Absolutely. I think it's time for us to go to the ERAD now. So, okay. So, we've gotten to this point. But first and foremost, let's show our viewers what is going on with your darling IREV. Thank goodness that it is not, there are no glitches this time around.
No,
hopefully there are no glitches.
Very...
But as we speak something, this is what we know. 2,445 polling units is what we're expecting results to come. And so far, 2,128.
And this is just 8 p.m. And this is about 5 hours
after the official close of polls.
And to a large extent, we'll say this is actually
87%.
87%
as of 8 p.m.
This actually
2,100. It is moved up to 2,128.
Yes, this
so now it's moved to 87% now.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
All right.
And I'll say that compared to recent elections, this seemed to be one of the earliest that we've seen. So the IREV is performing, I would say, creditably well, and is functioning, is stable. The results for Ekiti, we are not focused on the results for the other by-elections in 6 other states, but our focus is on this. And we already have at least over 70% of these results on the
ERA. For example, 111 out of 119. That's incredible. So it tells you that only about 8 of the results are yet to be in.
Absolutely.
And you look at also in Bonyi, 105 out of 115. So just about 10 are yet to be turned in. Isiarun, 104 out of 114. That's 10 that is left out. And well, this is a lot. Ekiti East, only 43 out of 112 is a long way to go.
Long way.
There. Well,
some of the local governments, as you know, they have network challenges and issues. So we wait to see how far. But we already got over 70% of them on the ERAD.
Yes, that's where we're.
Thanks to the technology.
Absolutely. So a lot of people need to understand. So whatever that you are seeing here, and I'm going to continue to refresh so that you see the numbers as they are growing. Whatever you're seeing on the IREV, the data clocks that we showed you yesterday, they're walking right and they click the data center of ERAD, and they're putting the figures together. They're using different kind of technology, including any kind of technology that you can imagine, without having to state the obvious. For those who are tech savvy, we know just about how some of these things are crunched. So we verify the result. It's not everything that goes into the IREV that we put on the ERAD, but basically what we do is that whatever result goes on the IREV is taken automatically to the ERAD platform is verified by on the multiple layers by the clerks, ERAD clerks, and then here we go. So I'm saying, ERAD.
I think we should refresh.
So
because that
a lot has changed in the last.
Gives us the current,
absolutely,
the current data.
So a lot is going on, which we will. So this is what we have. Don't forget, 2,445 out of 2,000, over 2,000 that's coming. We've processed and we have uploaded on the ERAD 1,681, which gives you about 68% of the entire that's coming. So pending is 764. That's about 31% of what you will. But it's moving so fast. It takes give and take about 10-15 minutes on when to process what goes on the IRF and on the ERAD platform. So something. The ERAD processing rate is about 53% that we've had, and the upload by local government. You can see
this is where we see, all the uploads. At least we've got 91% so far from Ekiti West, Idiosi, Ikere, Oye, Emure seem to be doing very well. But when you look at some of the other LGAs, you still have this number. So I think it's quite impressive. And so I think 2.0 seemed to be doing the magic.
Absolutely.
This is the first time.
The pace at which we're able to. Because a lot of people don't understand it. So that once you get the result in the IRF, automatically, we have multiple layers of verification and breaking down before we get these on.
This is remarkable.
Absolutely.
And we must say this. We've never gotten to this point, because one is either the IRF is unstable or there are issues with downloading. But the fact that we're able to download, and by the way, we've downloaded over 2,000 of those results. But like you said, all the due diligence processes need to be performed. That's why we're at 168. And I'm sure in the next hour or two, we're going to have all that on the portal.
So part of what we also would like to show you is the fact at how we are processing and making sense of all of these for you, and you can see the political parties and how they are performing. So wherever you may be sitting, I'm going to be showing you in the course of the next few hours how the result and the performance by color code. Of course, the APC is color coded in red, the PDP in green, ADC in amber. But so in most of the local government areas, you will see that everything is turning red. As of now, the results are not totally in. But I'm interested in a few local government areas, like Ikole, for example, and I'm hoping how these, for example, so Irakwadun. So this is what the results are telling us. The registered voters, 3,751 of them. Accredited voters, 1,671. The total votes cast, 1,672. The leading party, as we have it, and the voter cast. This is what the ERAD will give to you
so far.
And
when you check, you clearly see that's the number of registered voters, the total number of PVCs collected in these local governments. This is where we are with the turnout, based on the data that has been processed. And just to be clear, it is based on the data that have been processed on the ERAD, and so far we're at 1,673 results. Again, this is what it actually provides as of this moment, and I know subsequently as it gets updated, you will definitely bring this your way.
I'm interested, Ikole. This is what is happening in Ikole so far. This is what we know. But interesting analysis will be coming up in the next couple of minutes about the result that we have so far, what it means, the patterns, who is in the lead, and what exactly would be the reaction of the other political parties. We'll take a break, everyone. But when we return, we're not done just yet. All of this, we're making sense of it for you. Sometimes you don't have to wait for INEC to be reading the result all through the night. You already have a sense of what this means. We're not announcing the result, by the way. We're just making sense of the result for you using technology. ERA 2.0 is fast moving. And of course, before INEC results are in, you are in the front seat.